Hello again, Christopher here to talk about Sentinel Tactics, and this is a gameplay video, so we're going to be able to see how the game works. So first off, with Sentinel Tactics, oh great, here it is. So with that, we've got all these different pieces that you're going to use to put your game together. So the first thing when you open it up, you're going to want to get out the rulebook and read through that and figure out how your characters work. But then once you're ready to actually play a game, what you'll probably need is a scenario book, like this one. And the scenario book, now this scenario book obviously is the Rook City Infernal Relics rulebook, so obviously I'm working with prototypes here, but the scenario book will look and be shaped like a comic book like this is. And you'll open it up and you'll read through the comic book story and that'll be all well and cool. And then after a while of that, you'll get to a section here that falls out, and it's not going to fall out. It's going to be part of the thing, and it's going to say, here's how you set up the map, and here's how you place the characters, and here's how you do it for certain numbers of characters. And that's what I have written here on these prototype papers. So with these prototype papers, to explain how the scenario works, the first thing it says is set up the map this way. So what I will need is some map tiles. Oh, here they are. And the map tiles go out on the table like this. Perfect, that looks great, wow. And on the scenario map, it says that certain power transformer markers go in certain places. So if I could put those in the places they go here, and those look like this, and they go in those certain positions, and that lets you know the positions. This is a Baron Blade scenario, where Baron Blade is trying to hack into the power grid of Megalopolis. So, we're playing that scenario, and we're going to play with a certain number of players. How many players do we have here today? It looks like we have 5 players, or excuse me, 4 players. This scenario is playable with 3, 4, or 5 players, and so for a 4-player game, we're going to need one villain who will be Baron Blade. There, Baron Blade, great, and he is going to be fighting against 3 heroes. Let's go with Tachyon, and let's say also the Wraith, and let's also do one of the promo heroes. How about the Visionary? Great, so those will all go out, and we will use those. Of course, for them, we will need to have their tokens. So the tokens look kind of like this. And these come with the game, so you can just play with these tokens. But since we have miniatures, we're going to use miniatures instead. And they look like this. Oh, great. Those look fantastic. So, Baron Blade, the Wraith, the Visionary, and Tachyon. And according to the scenario setup, it says that all the heroes start anywhere on this central tile, and that Baron Blade starts anywhere up here on this edge. So that tells us how the setup for this looks. And then, obviously, they'll need their power cards, so we'll get their power cards out of their box. Great, and so these are their power cards, and Baron Blade gets his deck, the Visionary gets her deck, Tachyon gets her deck, and the Wraith gets her deck. And then the only other thing that we'll need to start, other than their decks of cards, for each scenario, certain characters will have additional scenario abilities. And Baron Blade has one that just says whenever he's within range 1 of one of these power markers, he rolls dice to see if he can hack into it or if he can splice into it. And so that'll happen as the course of the game. It's explained to the scenario, and there'll be an additional card for Baron Blade for that. At the start of the game, each character will go through and pick a couple of their powers to have in play, and the rest of their deck will stay in hand, or you can set it on the table. You don't need to hold it the whole time. And so each of the characters will go through and pick 2 of their powers that they'll start with. Go ahead and move Visionary over here so she's easier for me to reach. And then the only other thing that's left to do is to roll movement at the beginning of the game. But to roll movement, we're going to need some dice. Great. And so with each of these characters, they have a different movement code. So for, say, Visionary, her movement code is a 2 with an up arrow. So you roll 2 dice, and you take the highest one. I rolled a 4 and a 1, so Visionary's movement is 4. Tachyon has a movement code of 3 with an up arrow. So she rolls 3 dice. I rolled a 2, a 4, and a 2, so her speed is 2 as well for this turn. And then that changes at the end of your turn. You roll movement for a new turn, for the next turn, rather. So let's go through what a single turn looks like, and then we'll go through some attacks and some defenses between the characters on the board. At the beginning of your turn, you have your Powerup Phase. During your Powerup Phase, we'll go ahead and do the Visionary's turn since she's right here in front of me. And during your Powerup Phase, you have your deck of cards, and you have your cards that are in play, and you may pick up one of your cards and set down a card. So at the beginning of my turn, I'm going to say, you know what, I don't want to be using Rest the Mind anymore. I'm going to use Foresight. Foresight on it says when it comes into play, do a thing, so I do that thing, and we're good to go. That's your Powerup Phase. Then you have your Surge Phase. In the Surge Phase, you do anything on any of your cards that says Surge. I don't happen to have anything, but things that include in the Surge Phase could be like during the Surge Phase, you gain a token, like an attack +1 or or defense +1 token. Great, like those. So we'll put those here for now because we don't need them yet, but that's the type of token that you would get in that phase. And then there is the go time phase, which is when the action happens. You do as many actions as you have on your character sheet or your character panel. Visionary has 2 actions, so I could say move and make an attack, or I could sprint and take a dodge action, or things like that. And those are all detailed in the rules PDF that we have on the main page of the Kickstarter. Then the last phase is to be continued, in which you do any wrap-up things that are left and roll movement for your new turn. So at the end of your to be continued phase, any wrap-up things that are in play that you have to do, and then you roll your 2 dice for your movement, take the higher one, and you're good to go. That's your entire round. For the purpose of the scenario, we read through the comic book story. We set up the board as explained in the scenario. The villain has his setup as explained in the scenario, and the heroes have their setup. And then in the process of playing through, it tells you at the beginning who gets what turn order token. So in a 4-player game, which is what we have here, Baron Blade goes on turn 1 and 3, and the heroes go on 2, 4, and 5. So we'd say, okay, Visionary's going 2, Tachyon's going on 4, Wraith's going on 5, or whatever order you choose. And then as each turn happens, you would go through each of those phases of the turns that we've talked about, and the characters would do the things they have to on those turns, on those phases. So that gives you an idea of the kind of how the turn order goes. So let's look at some specific attacks. So say Baron Blade was hanging out here, right next to the Visionary. They're adjacent to each other, and Baron Blade is going to make his slash and burn attack, which has that die code that we explain in the rulebook, and it says he misses on 2s and 4s, and he rolls 3 dice. So he rolls 3 dice for his attack, and any 2s and 4s he removes. So he rolled 1 4, so that's removed, and he has 2 6s left. That's fantastic. The Visionary has a defense of 3, so she rolls 3 dice to block that attack. And she didn't roll anything high enough to block any of the attack dice, so she would take 2 damage. If she had rolled, say, a 6 and a 2 and another 2, then the 6 could block one of Baron Blade's 6s, but his 6 would still get through, and so she would take a point of damage. The only other thing that's really important in that is how range is measured, in that if these characters are 1, 2, 3 spaces away, which they are now, and Visionary makes her attack, it says Mind Spike, it misses on 1s and 2s, it rolls 3 dice. She rolls her 3 dice, she removes any 1s and 2s because they are the auto misses. And then anything, since they're 3 spaces away, let's say they're 4 spaces away. If they're 4 spaces away, 1s, 2s, and 3s would miss because they don't make range, but 4s, 5s, and 6s all make range. So that gives you the spread of how range and how attacks are controlled by the numbers you roll on the dice. The game plays through. Each scenario has different win and loss conditions. In this scenario, Baron Blade has to splice into a certain number of these power markers, and when he gets a certain number of successes, he takes those as successful splicings. And the heroes have to incapacitate Baron Blade a certain number of times before he does that. If the heroes knock the Baron Blade out enough times, then they win this scenario. If Baron Blade gains enough of these power markers, then he wins the scenario. And that kind of shows you what the different objectives would be. Different scenarios are going to have very different objectives, and those objectives are going to control sort of who's trying to do what. Baron Blade isn't trying to knock out the heroes. He mostly cares about getting away from them and getting to these power markers in this first scenario. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and keep on saving the multiverse.